Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Welcome to the Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist, an author, and the creator of the awareness integration theory. So thrilled to have you join me today. I promise you this is very insightful and intriguing discussion. In this episode, I chat with Cody Peterson. He has been a student of spirituality and religion since childhood. He's passionate about the teachings of Carl Jung, and he found a profound intersection between a Jungian teaching, transformation, and AA's Alcoholic Anonymous 12-step approach. 11 and plus years of sobriety, Cody Peterson takes his own spiritual practice very seriously and believing that his recovery and his life depends on it. So he shares his insight into a modern spiritual transformation through his writings and podcast appearances, teaching his audience to make peace with those parts of themselves that they've spent their lives avoiding, thereby unlocking transformative power that they never dreamed possible. He's an avid outdoor adventurer and an owner with his wife of small construction company. His new book is the one we talk about, A Shadow of a Figure of Light, the archetype of the alcoholic and the journey to enlightenment. Cody and I talked about Jung and the concept of mythology, how that's important, how connection to yourself is important and is part of that concept of the alcoholic archetype, the yearning for wholeness, the yearning to come back to you, and how falsely in a delusional way we connect ourselves to some substance or a behavior to get there doesn't get us there, and how we could come back to another path of coming to wholeness. It was a beautiful conversation. I learn a lot always from people come in. I'm positive you will enjoy our conversation too. So be sure to subscribe to this podcast, my YouTube channel. Rate it, please. Go to all of the places where you can rate it, please. And connect with me through my website, foojanzeine.com, or any of my social media platforms. Get Foojan app. We have 32 areas of you being able to kind of connect with yourself and look at how each one of these areas of life works for you. And we have a Mira, which is the companion AI chatbot, which will answer all of your questions from the awareness integration path. So I'm positive you'll enjoy it. Go to either Apple or Google and get Foojan app. Connect with me. Share your thoughts with me. I love to hear from you. Now, without further ado, here's Cody Peterson.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Do you wish to wake up one day and hit the life reset button? Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine, helps you navigate crucial life areas, heal the past traumas, and cultivate fulfilling relationships and careers. Life Reset is your guide to a profound journey to reshape your life. Grab your copy on Amazon or Audible now and embark on a path to a more joyous and fulfilled life.
Well, welcome to the show, Cody Peterson. It's such a joy to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, I think the first conversation that I would love to have is the name of your book, The Shadow of a Figure of Light. And then you have this beautiful symbol on your book that I want our viewers and listeners to kind of see this and see, your book is Shadow of the Figure of Light, the archetype of the alcoholic and the journey to enlightenment. Tell us about this art it's fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So this is actually an older version of the cover. It's been updated since. So now it's like kind of a black cover with mountains behind it, which was kind of indicative of the story that's inside of the book, about Carl Jung's own quest, I guess, for his myth of meaning, or his personal myth. So the image was actually drawn by a friend of mine, and I stumbled on it after I had completed the book. And after I had written the story of Jung and Jaime de Angelo and their trip to Taos, New Mexico. And the image really struck me because Jaime, it turns out, was fond. It appears that he was quite fond of psychedelic mushrooms, and he had discovered sort of his own spiritual, connection, I guess, through practicing with Native Americans. And so, and I liked the image because I feel like it captures that essence of what Jaime had to have discovered during his kind of vision quests out in the mountains. So in a way, it's sort of the shadow of Mountain Lake. Mountain Lake was the native elder who spoke to Jung in 1925 in Taos, New Mexico. And Mountain Lake had told Jung that he was telling Jung about his tribe's myth, the Puebloan tribe myth, which was that with their sort of ceremonies, they helped the sun to rise and cross the sky each day. And that really moved Jung. That made him sort of remember, I guess, that he still was yet to discover his own myth of meaning. And so that really set Jung on a kind of an interior quest where he was able to find his own myth, is what he says. So yeah, the image is a shadow of I guess that. So
at the beginning, when I was becoming a therapist, I read a lot of Jung, and I did a lot of the dream work in our, obviously, dream classes. We put in a book, a notebook beside our bed, and any type of symbolization that showed up in our dream, we would write it, and then we would start looking at our subconscious, how it was bringing a lot of different factors into specific ways of giving us clues and what the meanings were. And as you were sharing right now, also it gave me, because I went to Colombia, and in trips with ayahuasca and then also mushroom, you see a lot of these concepts of different types of symbolization that it appeared to be very old. It's not my age. These are like ancient things that I had never seen before, but it was showing up consistently in these images and giving me a different kind of, let's say, feeling of power, the inner power, or giving me messages. And, obviously when we're trying to shift from the messages that our subconscious are giving us to the reality of everyday world and how you translate these together, it becomes really, really fascinating. And going through your book, I was watching the history of how you brought all of these together, but more than anything, how you brought it to combine it with the work of the 12th step, and how that work also brings, in order for us to look inside our habits or our addiction and the dark side of ourselves, and how to bring that and kind of connect that part of us toward spirituality. And beautifully, you shared about how psychology and spirituality are always dancing together somehow, where you're, from a psychological perspective of opening ourselves, we get to spirituality, and any type of spiritual work we do comes back into, kind of defining our psychology and the meaning and who we are. I just want to give you the floor to share about all of this, as I learned from your book.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I really grew to love about Carl Jung, was that I feel like he had discovered, or at least built on the idea that the human psyche speaks to us through symbolism, and that the language that it speaks is this sort of mythological language. And so as we so the reason I feel like psychology and religion are each on the same track towards what we might call enlightenment is that they're both dealing with the parts of ourselves that we perhaps can't see. And you know, what I've learned through the 12 steps is that the process of making those things conscious is what it really is the essence of spiritual awakening. So, you know, I love what Jung says, a man or a woman does not achieve enlightenment by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And so, you know, going back to the dreams, you know, I believe that dreams kind of represent our own personal myth, whereas myth is the dream of the collective, right? Myth is like the dream of the human race or the community or this, you know, the culture. And so these two things are highly, you know, related. And the, you know, the thing about the book is it really is, it is an examination of the shadow, right? Of that part of our psyche that we can't see, that we can't really put our fingers on, but that is certainly at least evident to those around us, that is, you know, pulling the strings in the background. So yeah, that goes back to the name of the book, The Shadow of a Figure of Light. It's that I try to bring a balance into the perspective that we have about spirituality and religion and even the God image, you know, and to try to really allow people or give people the permission even to be more accepting of their own darkness, and to look and to realize that really our darkness is the root of spiritual vitality. You know, it is by going into the darkness that we tap into those ancient powers and those ancient symbols that you know, we might be able to access through psychedelics or whatever. But those, you know, those things exist. They don't exist in the light, right? They exist in the darkness of the psyche and in the background of the psyche.
Well, as you're sharing, it brought to my attention also that whether we do this in psychotherapy, and, you know, I've been a therapist for almost 32 years and work with a lot of trauma, whether with people who were a victim of trauma or a perpetrator of the trauma. And you could definitely see that whether we're doing this in psychotherapy, whether we're doing it in a dream work, whether we are doing it in psychedelic treatments, or even in the spiritual realm, the first thing that shows up to get cleared is the darkness, is the parts of us that we don't like, that shows up, and either we're afraid of it, or we have a meaning that this shouldn't be, or that it's destroying us or our community, whether, you know, it's not good for me, nor those behaviors are good for others. And as you said, we've got to pass through these, regardless of the medium. Again, psychotherapy, spirituality, meditation, you know, when our brain quiets down, the first thing that shows up in order to get cleared are the darkness. And the healing apparently moves from and toward, in between the darkness, toward moving toward the acceptance. You know, from a psychological place, we go into an accepting ourselves, every part of us, and begin to love every part. From a spiritual world, you know, we begin seeing light in every cell of our body and everything that we do and the meaning that we do. And in most of the psychedelic journeys, depending on whatever people use, the first thing is, you know, going into the darkness, your fear, and kind of dying, you know, the concept of a death of that ego. And then, you know, you get into the wholeness and the experience of wholeness. With the meditation world, everywhere that I've experienced and I've tried, is more like you sit until you find yourself and connection. You sit through all of it, the pain of the body, the pain of the psyche, all of your fears. And then as you sit through them and they kind of open up, and finally you get into that kind of like the oneness within and with, you know, and with all out. And you started looking at this from that perspective, but it was interesting that you also connected it to alcoholism, addiction, and the work of the 12 step. Can you share about the link that you have created in this book?
Sure. So I am an alcoholic and a drug addict. I've been in recovery for over 10 years, 11 years. And what happened was I started seeing these sort of correlations between Carl Jung's ideas and then just sort of this collective kind of experience that so many of us have in the 12 steps. And so as I started to combine those, it dawned on me that, as you said, this idea of spiritual death, that's sort of I guess baked into the experience of the alcoholic, right? There's this, we call it hitting bottom or burning our life to the ground or whatever it is. And then it occurred to me that the transformation that an alcoholic experiences through the 12 steps is really kind of a prototype of psychological transformation just in general. As you said, these paths, they're all going in the same direction. So as I looked at alcoholism from this sort of universal perspective, so I pulled it from Carl Jung had written a letter to Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he said that the alcoholic's craving for alcohol is the equivalent on a low level of our spiritual thirst for wholeness or for union with God. And so that kind of struck me that there's this universal thirst for wholeness that all people have. And that the alcoholic then seems to be this prototype or sort of is this, it's almost like alcoholics are struck like with a really bad case of trying to find wholeness. So much so that they're willing to risk their lives for it, right? Through just all the mayhem that comes about in addiction. But what emerged from that sort of meditation was the concept of the archetype of the alcoholic, which I was surprised to find out has not really been explored or written about. I think a couple authors have maybe named the archetype of the alcoholic, but I was able to really dig into it and kind of flesh it out. And it does become, in terms of like alchemy or the dream world, I guess, alcoholism is the prime material. It's like the base psychic substance out of which the alcoholic's transformation occurs. In the 12 steps, we have an acronym for it. We say GOD, gift of desperation. So, it was a really profound statement and really gets to this idea that, as you said, by going through the darkness, that's how we can emerge on the other side and actually discover ourselves as beings of light. I like what Jung says, though. He says that at best, the human being is murky, right? Meaning we're not too light and we're not too dark, but we're all just sort of in the middle in this sort of murkiness. And I think once we discover that about ourselves and we're comfortable with it, and we begin to sense that everybody else is sort of in the same boat, then I feel like we've really made a breakthrough, because we're no longer really stuck to this old idea that we have to be really good or really, really light or anything in order to achieve spiritual connection, right? That was good news to me, that in order to have a religious experience, I don't have to be a religious person. And that just feels really good, because I feel like what I've been looking for my whole life is just that religious experience or that connection.
I consider myself an addict. Mostly, it was more like pacifier, my thumb, and then cigarette, and then food, right? So it's all oral addiction. And I look at the concept of addiction similar, whether it's alcohol or other drugs or any type of behavior. I've worked with addiction for 30 years. I opened like a outpatient program for addiction. I was working in inpatient for addiction and recovery for many, many years. And I consider one of the first things that I consistently have worked on myself in any of the healing modalities that I've done It's to look at that part of me that gets so attached that, like you say, it doesn't matter what the logic says about, the destruction, the attachment toward going towards something, it bypasses everything else. And as you were sharing, you're absolutely accurate about the attachment is toward oneness, because at every point, any type of addiction behavior, or the behavior of using alcohol or drug or anything else, it comes from some sort of unease and anxiety, and we're using something to calm down this disease, or this ease, in order to find that connection. Most of the people who I've looked upon as they're going through their recovery, the instigation of the recovery beyond the hit bottom has also been either falling in love, which is another level of connection, which pulls the other person out, or their spiritual connection that pulls someone up. And it's been their guide in finding themselves and connection to themselves. And when they find the path toward that, like you said, it calms the person down, and they can let go of the attachment to some tool that they thought is going to bring them to the oneness, and then they shift the tool to something that is going to take them to their oneness. So the concept of addiction is one of those concepts that it's always baffled me. And I work with a lot of clients right now, and I say I work with myself every day to look at this part of me that yearns consistently towards something which is existential. It's the existence of someone that matters, and that existence is that connection. And you're sharing in your book in how to come back to that, the self-discovery, through not only understanding these parts, but also embracing the darkness, embracing that yearning, embracing that part of us that is going toward the wholeness.
Yes. You remind me of something that Jung said. He says that compulsion is the great mystery of human life. And I think we could also say that alcoholism or any type of addiction is the great mystery of human life. And I think that the reason that strikes me as so sort of revelatory is that once I was able to overcome this great delusion that I had, is this, I mean, alcoholism is a disease of delusion, we could say. And it's such it strikes me that drug addicts and alcoholics who have literally burned their life to the ground still can't see that they're suffering from the mystery of compulsion, right? And so I think anytime that we can really get a grasp of the compulsion in our lives, whatever it looks like, in whatever sort of form it's manifesting in, we've made a huge leap in conscious awakening. After I realized that, I sort of overcame the compulsion to drink and use drugs, which is the essence of step one is just that. It's waking up to the delusion. It says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. And I think that the part about our life being unmanageable is really fascinating, because Jung was the one who helped me to recognize that these compulsions and this unmanageability that I feel, this need to sort of cover up my feelings at any cost almost, really stems from the self, right? And so we talk about the self usually in this sort of lofty, really referring only to the higher self, right? And Jung was really key in helping me understand that in terms of the unconscious, and in terms of the self, which is sort of a personification of the unconscious, there isn't really a higher and a lower. There is, for me, for my ego and the need to define these things, but that really, like, underneath it all is just the archetype of wholeness, right? And that it is through these compulsions that we walk into into the wholeness, that, and we're not going to get there if we don't have these compulsions. So the compulsions become the doorway into the self, because they're the doorway. The compulsion is it's the one thing, it's sort of the easiest way for me to recognize that I'm being compelled. And I love in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson uses the phrase alcoholic mind. And it's a really telling phrase, because what it shows me is that in terms of like this compulsive nature that people have, is that within the 12 steps, we've really got our finger on this sort of mystery that's really hard to grasp. Most people, if you ask them if they experience compulsion, they'll say no, right? Because the mind we tell ourselves, oh, I choose to do this, right? But really, we're not choosing it. It's happening to us, and it's sort of deriving out of the self, out of deep within ourselves. So, which I think is just a fascinating and really deep conversation, but I think it's one worth having.
Absolutely. My experience with myself and others has been more that the yearning shows up, and there's some behavior or a substance that immediately, for a very short time, gives us the glimpse of the connection and the oneness. And then we get hooked to that path that keeps wanting us to go toward that connection. And then we associate that path with pleasure and connection and wholeness. The association is not accurate. And therefore, regardless of what we do and how much it destroys us, that's where, it's the delusion where we lie to ourselves, where just one more drink or one more use or one more of this behavior is just going to take me to that. And then not realizing that the path that we're taking is a path of destruction. Yes, it opened us once to that connection, but this is not the path to that connection. But the association of that drug or the behavior, it just holds just because we had one glimpse of a connection with this particular vehicle. And it's been one of the hardest things to do with myself and clients, to shift this connection, to shift this type of association that someone has put in, and to open it up and see that the desire to be one and wholeness has other paths to get there, but not through the path that you're going toward. And somehow associate the path with destruction and pain, which they're experiencing anyway, but they're just going through the denial of it. And they have this glamorized fantasy about it. One more time, and I'm going to get there. I've even had people who've been sober and clean for many, many years. And when what do you see at the end of your best dream? And it's like, right before I die, I can have one more time of using. You can see this, romance that gets created. And that's all because of the association that has gotten created with this vehicle, which is not, like you called it, a delusion of that. And the understanding and the awareness, which 12-step brings a lot. I'm really, grateful for the 12th step many times as we work with people, because I think when someone really works through the 12 steps, it's an amazing tool of self-discovery and self-discipline and, moving on into integrity, especially because addiction is one of the conditions and the disease that just, we lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves and everyone around us. So bringing us back into integrity and wholeness is 12-step has really been an amazing path toward that.
Absolutely. It certainly has been for me. I think underlying the archetype of the alcoholic is the trickster complex, right? Which is this sort of animalistic, driven, instinctual, the really dark side, kind of archaic side of what it means to be a human. And, the shift that you know, in terms of like this mythology, is that the trickster is sometimes able to shapeshift and become a shaman, right? And so they're able, they bring the lessons that they've learned from all of their ridiculous scrapes, you know, out in the forest. They bring them back to the tribe, and they're able to help other people to get a handle on those, you know, those dark energies. And I find that is a similar path that we try to take in the 12 steps, is that we, you know, that darkness and that sort of amoral, animalistic lifestyle, we, you know, unlike anywhere else in the world, I think is in the rooms of the 12 step fellowships, is that we can take that darkness, our own character defects, and use them, you know, to actually help other people that struggle the same way. And so they become these great assets, right, that we can use to literally help save lives of other people. And so that sort of dualistic thing that takes place in the objective psyche, I guess, in the collective unconscious, you know, it's also this driving component in the life of the alcoholic and the drug addict. And I try to capture that in my book, and to try to show, you know, people who maybe aren't familiar with either the 12 steps or with Jungian theory, just how these things are playing out in real life, and what they mean to us, and how we can apply them, and stuff like that. So it's great.
How has it worked for you? Because you shared, you know, you've been a part of the psychotherapy world, working on yourself, and then also a part of the 12th step, and, you know, looking at also the mythology, and how has that specifically in your world worked for you?
So I started out my journey through the 12 steps, and I'm very grateful for that, because by the time I got to therapy, I had already been through the steps and had quite a few years of being clean and sober. And so I was really able to engage with my therapist on a very honest level. I had done therapy before, but it wasn't as good. And it wasn't the therapist's fault. It was really my fault, because, you know, the therapist can only work with what I'm willing to bring to the table. So when I approached therapy with the same almost like defeated ego that I, you know, that same attitude that I needed early on in the 12 steps, because I had literally just destroyed my life and I had no other options, you know, I tried to really harness that same attitude in therapy, and it ended up being a really productive, you know, fast moving experience. So, and I found those things, you know, to really be working together in a really profound way. I think that therapy has helped me get probably. I think the 12 steps did a lot of good surface work in terms of the shadow and making the unconscious conscious. My work with the therapist helped to go a level under that, to try to determine how my own ancient traumas are continually replaying in my relationships, and to be able to communicate those things with my wife. You know, she's doing therapy too, and we do couples therapy. So now we've started talking about the way we fight, and just how our trauma and our issues are dancing. And then recently I've actually started doing my own dream work, which feels to me like now I'm going to a level even deeper. And it's really been mind blowing, you know, the things that I'm uncovering about myself and about my connections and about my relationships, you know, like with my parents and stuff like that. It's just really profound, you know, this journey inward. It's not really a very common path, I think, in Western culture. You know, I think addiction is really just it's like the ism that manifests through this materialistic world that we live in. The concept is that everything that's good is outside of us, right? And that, you know, once we are willing to turn inside and look for the answers in here, we start to, I mean, it's frightening, right? It's scary at first. Oh, I just had the
That was a beautiful time for that to happen. Oh
that's
my God, that was amazing.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was
So
for people who are listening to us and not viewing us. As Cody was holding, kind of brought both of his hand to his heart. Suddenly, the app that is on Zoom started, having all of this fireworks around him. So it was a beautiful time and a symbolization for you.
yeah, that was great. Yeah, so it's been a wonderful journey. I'm really happy to be on the journey. The book was part of that journey for sure. And I'm very, very pleased with the way things are going. I feel very blessed. So
It's beautiful. Everybody, get this book because everyone has with the percentage that we know, either everybody has some sort of addiction or someone who has some sort of an addiction. And this could really, really support you to have an understanding of what the process is and what it all can mean and how you can support yourself and others. Shadow of the Figure of Light, the Archetype of the Alcoholic, and the Journey to Enlightenment by Cody Peterson. Cody, anything we haven't shared that you really want people to know?
well, not really. I mean, I do have a website if people want to get a hold of me. I usually try to respond quickly if they submit a form there. I also try to post videos of seminars that I do. I'm doing a book study, which is kind of nice. So we're getting into a level that's a little deeper. That's available on my website. It's cody-peterson.com. Pretty easy to find. The book's available on Amazon. It's also available on my website or through Chiron. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here and hopefully, I do want to say that I really appreciate like the work you do. This book has opened sort of some doors for me just to see how many people there are just in the world that are trying to build and create connection and help people to connect and have more intimacy and to grow. And I find it really fascinating. I think it's beautiful. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I've learned a lot from your book, and it brought me back and connected me back to Jung, for which I haven't been connected for 20 years, and how we could utilize the symbolization in listening to ourselves, bringing back the connection that we have toward ourselves in any format that it's useful and that we become one with. So thank you for taking the time to discover that and putting it in a book and sharing your world, sharing our ups and downs with each other. And I think that's part of one of the most and beautiful gift that AA has offered to humanity has been this shared space where people can be who they are without feeling shame and having the experience with each other that they could sit with their darkness and then bring it into healing. It's a very different environment. People can sit together and be a bunch of people who are, designing destruction. People can come together that way. But AA has brought the space, and NA, AA, all of those which started from AA, bring the people who could bring their darkness and put it out and heal it together. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts that AA has given our society anywhere in the world. So I'm always grateful for that. And I think, as you said, addiction is a process that is across the world, all humanity, and across ages. And it has been one of those conversations that, we're trying to find the path. And the more we try to find a path, interestingly enough, the percentage gets higher. So I did an evolutionary psychology course, which my paper was about, addiction. Is it like an evolution's byproduct? Because when we were in nature, the nature only offered us so much that you could utilize. The seasons changed. You couldn't overindulge in anything because the nature just wasn't allowing for overindulgence. And I think as we human beings were able to go beyond nature and create, manufacture things, consistently, it became more of just the indulgence world. So I could see from a behavioral place and evolutionary place, this just became the byproduct. But the internal piece, I think, is exactly what you shared in your book, is the yearning for connection to who we are. And, the sooner that we have the ability to create that, the connection to us, there's a path out of that kind of a compulsion or manageability of it. So thank you for bringing that. Any last words?
No, just thank you so much. And, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And I wish the best for you and everyone who's listening. For all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy, developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine, is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.